Hello, everyone. Welcome to the September edition of Dr. Spotfire. Today, I'm joined by Minerva, and we're going to be talking about automating tasks in Spotfire 10. In Dr. Spotfire, our slogan is learning is not driven by answers, but by questions. The more questions you ask about your data and the problems you're trying to solve drives you to learn new ways and more advanced ways to solve those problems. Our lab location is in Seattle, Washington today, and this map shows all the customers we have around the world, tuning in from around the world, joining this webinar. A quick reminder, we have our London TIBCO Now event. If you're in the Europe region or London area, September 25th to 26th, we'll be doing our last TIBCO Now conference for the year. So make sure you join if you can, talk to your account executive if you need more info. And at the top right here is the registration link. I also wanted to let you know that Andrew Berridge, a data scientist from TIBCO, will be doing a book signing for his new book, A Comprehensive Primer for TIBCO Spotfire. It's a really great book. I've read it myself, and even if you've been using Spotfire for a while, there's a lot of good tips in here that can teach you new things that you may not have known about. So would recommend stopping by and getting the book signed if you're at the conference event. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Minerva, where she's going to show you automating tasks in Spotfire using automation services. Minerva, over to you.
Thank you, Neil. All right, I'm going to start share my screen right now. There we go. All right. So good morning, Spotfire enthusiasts. This is Minerva Datta. I'm an SC in Analytics here at TIBCO, and I have been working with Spotfire since version 7.4 to the latest 10.4. Along the way, I have come across several interesting customer use cases and questions, and the basics and best practices have always been my favorite. Today, I'm going to talk to you about Spotfire automation services. Remember, all that I tell you is information that you can gather by spending maybe half a day on your computer, but I'm here to condense it within half an hour and use my TIBCO in-house experts to answer the more advanced questions if they crop up. As a bonus, you get to speak with a Spotfire enthusiast and listen to her biased opinion on why Spotfire is one of the easier and better tools in the market. So let's get down and understand the basics. Firstly, when I talk about automation, why am I talking about automation? Where does this automation reside? Where does this run? So broadly speaking, if you were to look at automation in Spotfire, it can happen in one of these three tiers. In the client tier, we are usually interested in automation via, maybe Iron Python, where we can string together a set of clicks or a series of checkboxes, like say looping through a filter selection to trace the path of a hurricane. And I actually have this example running. So if I wanted to say trace the path of a hurricane right now, let's do this. Yeah. So I'm going slowly, there's a lag here, but I'm just trying to move the slider to come up with a concrete path, right? And if I wanted to do this by automating my clicks, Iron Python would be the way to go. But I'm not interested in that kind of automation today. My automation today is the kind of automation that comes while working with the Spotfire server. When you want to automate jobs, that automation services is the simple web service that you will call upon in order to do the same. Here, the client is programmed to basically just initiate the task. And before I jump further, another view, which is very similar, but just color-coded, shows you the worker service tier. This is another tier wherein the automation services resides and talks with the server. So let's get to it. In the Spotfire vocabulary, these tasks that constitute a job or constitute an automation task could be as simple as opening a visualization. Or exporting a visualization, or sending an email with a visual to a set of addresses. Just imagine the automation services as an invisible client more commonly referred to as a headless client. And that is the way that you would think about automating a task in Spotfire. Now, before we get to specific tasks and see how automation services works, let's just visualize the vocabulary a little better. In general, if you wanted workflows in your automation services to execute, you would be looking at an XML file. And don't worry, you don't have to code the XML files. Spotfire has a very beautiful GUI-centric way of making sure that your tasks can be done inside of Spotfire in a very Spotfire environment that you're very used to. So in order to just have a look at this, let's just go here and see one of those tasks. Inside our Spotfire client, I'm right now in Spotfire desktop. If I go to the tools menu and go to the automation services menu, this is what the automation services job builder looks like. This is the utility that builds that XML file through GUI tools. I have a simple file, a very preliminary file that I have uploaded, which basically has 3 tasks. Remember I said that a job is made up of tasks. Out of the box, Spotfire comes with these set of tasks. We will go into details of when a certain task is used, so don't worry about that right now. Now, in order to run a task, I can either schedule it, which is our ultimate aim with the automation services, or I can, for a proof of concept, run it locally. So as you see, something changed in the backdrop, wherein my map chart is updating, and basically I got a timestamp in my text area. So this was a job that ran locally within my Spotfire client through the automation service. And we'll read into what happened exactly here. So let's get back to the slide that we were on. All right. So an automation services job is created by the job builder that we just saw in the Spotfire analyst client. And when we saw the run locally piece of the Spotfire client, it is very simple to think that we could have done this on our own, but it is the periodic scheduled cadence of automation services which has made it a star web service in the Spotfire world. In order to understand this a little better, and in order to contrast the changes in Spotfire 10 and the previous versions, if you were using the previous versions, let me just show you a snippet from our documentation earlier and a screenshot from a latest administrative console. So Spotfire Automation Services has existed since a very long time. It is a web service that is very robust and very performant under high, job schedules. But earlier, we used to have something called a third-party utility, which was basically a third-party scheduler. We used the Windows Task Scheduler in order to get our job done. But recently, in the Spotfire 10 releases, the automation services can be used within the Spotfire environment completely. So by this, I mean that the third-party scheduler piece was incorporated into our administrative console. And this is how it looks like through a simple screenshot. And we were able to schedule jobs on our administrative console so that there were no moving pieces left. And in order to understand exactly why I'm talking about 3 disjoint pieces, let's just refer to this simple diagram. If I had to break down the individual concepts inside automation services, these would be the 3 things that we would discuss. The job builder is the tool that you just saw in the analyst client that lets us generate a simple XML file. The XML file that I opened had 3 tasks in it, and these 3 tasks can actually be seen. So I'm just going to bring up, so that XML file was basically something like this. I don't have to concern myself with what exactly each tag stands for. It is just auto-generated. But if you were savvy with XML and wanted to tweak and write something custom, Spotfire did does give you the room to do just that. For users who don't want to use the GUI interface, we have extensive API support for the automation services job builder. Now, the administrative interface always existed, but right now scheduling can be done in the administrative interface. In versions before 10, and this is something that is good to know because we've incorporated it, and my customers personally have loved the fact that we don't need a third-party tool anymore. Earlier, the client job sender was used to execute jobs. Now, the execution piece is handed over to the administrative interface, but if you still wanted to use a third-party scheduler, or wanted a certain kind of workflow that needed a third-party scheduler, you could very well do that as well. So for the most part, as a Spotfire user, it is important to understand that you'd probably be just working with the job builder and the administrative interface. The client jobs sender is a command line utility, and it usually only exists when you want to create a job and schedule it outside of the administrative interface. So we saw this piece. We are now going to get into a few details about why we need to automate. So what you see next is the Spotfire automation services documentation. The highlighted box shows some standard tasks. These are tasks that are available to you out of the box. And I highly recommend just going through this guide in order to get a better idea about what kind of tasks Spotfire offers out of the box. Now, I don't want you to read everything because I want to make the task simpler for you. So I'm going to run through 4 broad and simple examples that might spark some ideas and make you want to use Spotfire inside of your organization. So let's look at the process of automating an application through a bookmark. Now, this might not seem overly appealing or worth the effort, but imagine this scenario. I have an analysis file with your company's data for performance by region. And I want the managers of each region to receive a weekly update on their region's performance. Now, Bookmarks, the simple utility of Bookmarks, can help me here by letting me create 4 jobs. So imagine this is your main DXP, and I can create 4 jobs for the 4 regions based on the same DXP. Now, I, as a manager of the West region, can open the Spotfire interface my company is used to and see a view of the analysis most suited and most relevant to my day-to-day function. You can replicate this through personalized information links or a configuration block that we are going to talk about a little later. Now, I have included this line again and again just to reinforce that automation services doesn't just let me build a job, but it lets me run it at a specified cadence so that that weekly report gets to the end users without any manual intervention. Now, imagine this kind of a scenario, and the same stretch of imagination can be applied to maybe exporting an image or using Spotfire's export to PDF utility in order to generate custom reports with maybe headers and footers and custom timestamps for your end users. Remember that these individual tasks are granular and simple, but it is a combination of these tasks or jobs that achieves the end results. All of these jobs have configuration options that let you customize that job to your tailored requirement. They also have a set of listed limitations. I always like to say that limitations in Spotfire just means tweaking in the form of coding expertise. So I don't foresee that as a solid limitation. But for the sake of out of the box features, let's dig deeper and go into example 2. Now, example 2 is basically about opening an analysis from the library. This is as a rule of thumb, this is the first task that you incorporate in order to enable any job. Now, in our DXP example right here, when I had Spotfire opened here, I didn't incorporate the open file from library. And you might ask why that was the case. And that's simply because if I am inside my Spotfire client right now, the analyst client, and I'm opening a specified DXP, by default, these actions are applied to this specified DXP. But say I was saving my, XML or my job file onto the server, and that had to be applied to multiple DXPs, it's always a good idea to incorporate, to incorporate the open from library, open analysis from library into your main job file. Okay, so opening an analysis from library is usually the first task that you incorporate in order to build a job. Now, customization options here include being able to include a code snippet, formally called a configuration block. And this lets you set the initial state of an analysis. Now, this is a very powerful concept. And let me walk you through it with the same example that we were working with in the past. Now, suppose I'm a manager in the West region, and I like my DXP to have a certain set of filters and bookmarks applied in the beginning, right when I open. I'm not as Spotfire savvy, but I am a Spotfire consumer. Now, the configuration block here would allow me to set this page. Say I have 200 pages in my DXP, I would be able to set my page to a predetermined page title called Overview, and I would be able to set my bookmark that I just initiated through the automation services and use that bookmark to make my West region manager see only results of the West region. Now, configuration block combined with the bookmark in example 1 is a very powerful tool to allow you to, be able to customize views based on a user's identity. There is one more way in which you can achieve this end result, and it's probably a more logical way to do it, and we will cover this in a subsequent exam. Now let's walk through another example that is like possibly a best practice at TIBCO right now. A few best practices have developed over the past that allow Spotfire to drastically improve performance with SPDF data. Now we are talking about absolutely time-sensitive dashboards that need to be optimized for response times. A workflow of these two simple tasks often does the trick here. And I call this a best practice because it's often worked very well for customers. Now, for the veterans in the audience, please feel free to add more insight, but this is how I foresee this happening. So we are going to go to the automation services guide. If you are in any doubt as to where to find this guide, remember, you have to go to docs.tibco.com for any official release of maybe a client or release of a web service like the Spotfire automation services, and just type in the product that you're looking for. So automation services should lead to specific results. While that is happening, I have cache results here as well. So this opens up. 10.2 is our latest documentation, so you're on the most current version. But getting back to our example, I said that two tasks, basically the export data table to library and the replace data table, do a fantastic job at improving the response time for dashboards. So let's go to task 1. I'm going to go to my contents and look at export data table to library. Sorry, that is not the one. Export data table to library. So imagine you have a data table, maybe in your SQL database, and taking a snippet for this time-sensitive dashboard and converting it into a Spotfire binary data file, say overnight, for your executives to have a look in the morning. is a very good practice if you want exceptional response times. Now, Spotfire binary data file is a very optimized data format built for consumption inside a Spotfire. It is highly optimized. It leaves a really small, well, a comparatively small memory footprint, and Spotfire reads this kind of a data file very rapidly. So if you were to have a daily cadence or maybe an hourly cadence for exporting this data file to the library, you could then move on to step 2 to replace the contents of a data table. So this data table would be the data table linked to your DXP. Now, every time the DXP is opened up, or depending on the cadence that you've set up, you would be able to swap your latest SPDF file with inside of this DXP, making sure that the performance is very optimized for your particular use case or your particular customer base. So that was one of the examples that basically uses caching in order with SPDF files in order to increase and improve performance. Getting back to my presentation right now, example 4 was actually a presentation from PerkinElmer. So PerkinElmer has a few use cases, and this is a little older presentation, but very relevant presentation that is publicly available. So the link to this will be included. Now, there is one use case that talks about personalized information links inside of Spotfire, and there is a job that is built in order to give you a specific view. So recall the example of you being a manager of the West, and you wanting to see a specific view of your Spotfire DXP. Now, the last way of doing this out of the box would be to have a personalized information link fetch relevant data for your manager of the West as soon as he or she puts in his username or a specific token. And how this is done is through, as I said, personalized information link or parameterized information links, wherein an information link is basically a SQL query. The parameter here is a variable. So this allows you to fetch a very precise query from your underlying database and showcase the result of that in the dashboard that you're working with. So this kind of an implementation allows you to fetch results based on a common column. And this is discussed in this slide above, wherein you probably have a column identifying this user, and your query, the technicality of it is that your query will have a variable slot that allows you to squeeze in that user's identity and allows you to extract information for a very personalized view right there. So having understood this, I'd like to cover one last task right here for understanding the command line utility of the thing as well. Now, I understand that not very many of our users are interested in the command line utility, but the diagram above is actually a very good guide as to why we should use this. So earlier, when we didn't have the scheduler built right in, the client job sender was the utility that executed your jobs, right? Now this client job sender worked through the command line, and we have extensive documentation for you to peruse through and understand how to enable this. But it was the glue that actually executed tasks. Now the administrative interface inside Spotfire 10 does that for you, but the underlying concept is simple, that you would ideally, we're going back to this diagram right here, you would ideally just interact with the Spotfire servers, and the underlying mechanism initiating that interaction has been swapped, and can be used interchangeably depending on which kind of task scheduler that you are more comfortable with. So that was one of the most important things. If you are interested in understanding, I'm just going to go right to the bottom. If you're interested in understanding how to create a utility, or the general how-tos, remember the docs.tipco.com page is very helpful. In addition, we have notes that we can link to the YouTube channel that can tell you how exactly you can open a task scheduler and create a task in general that can trigger a specific response. So it's very well documented in the form of our knowledge-based articles as well. All right, so that was one last thing. Now, an important snippet that I find really useful with Spotfire 10 is, now, ever since, so I'm going to go ahead and close this particular task. Now, ever since our PDF reports have come to life, the export to PDF option in Spotfire 10, is pretty cool. And I say that because if I say, okay, export to PDF, I get to create a report. Now, the automation has adapted with this paradigm, and it has deprecated the initial export to PDF functionality. It's still present, but it's a deprecated feature, and it allows you to export reports. And this is a trend that we will continue to see as our feature enhancements go through in subsequent versions of Spotfire. But right here, if I wanted to create a specific report, let's just change the size of this. I'm going to change this size of it. All right. Perfect. So if I was to export this report as is, the steps are very simplistic. If I generated a report that allowed me to export the report in a specific format, remember that I could use that generated report inside of the Spotfire automation services in order to send out an email of the report, in order to send out a link related to that report, or do any of the steps that are included inside the automation services job builder task. This is something that we didn't look at in detail, so let's just peruse through it. The export to PDF option, as I said, was deprecated. Instead, we have the export report to PDF that allows you to send out a very well-structured report with proper templates in order to your end customers. And this was a highly voted feature for an ideas portal as well. The other really popular features inside of the automation services is the utility to send an email. Now, the send an email was one of the most popular automation services utilities just because it allowed that cadence, and it allowed you to send attachments or a bookmarked version of your analysis file to your end customers. Exploring this utility, even if you're working offline from your analyst client, is the first step of getting to know Spotfire automation services. So feel comfortable doing so. Feel comfortable adding several steps along the way in order to, just visualize your workflow. Remember, these are individual tasks, and a sequence of these tasks leads to a concrete workflow. And an execution of this task locally would allow you to test this on your local machine. If you were to set the cadence of this on your server, right now with our administrative console, you could schedule this exact workflow to run every week, every day, or certain days of the week as you deem fit. All right. So very broadly, this was holistic overview on Spotfire automation services in half an hour. I'm going to ask Neil if there are any questions.
Yeah, and reminder to the attendees that you can just put some questions in the chat if you have any questions. I've also been putting links that Minerva's been talking about to the documentation, the PerkinElmer use case, and I just put in some links to some of our user groups as well online. So if you have any questions, feel free to put it in. Now, Minerva, I was wondering, how do I know if my organization has automation services?
Right, perfect. So the first way to understand if your organization has automation services or not is to contact your Spotfire administrator. He or she is the one who gave you access to support, whose emails you receive periodically. But above and beyond that, one of the easiest ways to check if you have automation services or not is just to go to tool and see if this option is grayed out or doesn't exist. If it doesn't exist, it's very likely that automation services is not installed in your Spotfire implementation. But remember that we usually sell Spotfire automation services is a separate entity, but we usually bundle it and sell it in our enterprise versions. So it's very likely that you do have it. And in case even these two actions don't yield results, feel free to reach out to us or use TIPCO support in order to understand if automation services is enabled in your organization or not.
Okay. I also have some questions from users here. Caswell was asking, when jobs are run on the server, is there a close analysis step? And I believe that that step's not necessary, right? When you're running automation services, it just, you might open the analysis, update it, but there's no need to close it, correct?
Oh, yeah. So out of the box, you're right. Sorry, Neil, there's no close analysis step as such. That's because, yeah, there is no concrete step that says close analysis, and we don't see it here as well. But there are ways of making the process run in the background, and we can send out documentation for it. If you know you're worried about duplicating the process or two people opening it or anything of that sort, or even performance for that matter. But out of the box, there isn't a step that says, okay, you know, delete or close or whatever.
Right, that's all just, it's running in the background. It's not, you know, it's just opening the file in the background, right? So it's not going to, well, you know, that kind of brings to that question, is it going to leave that data cached if you have your analysis set up to cache the data and then you run an automation services job? Will that recache it kind of like a scheduled update?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Will that leave the data cached in the Spotfire memory when you open an analysis for automation services?
Oh, yes, exactly. It will. So even opening it at a certain point, because you've now initiated the initial pull, right? So that does enable caching if your settings are hooked onto that set. Yeah. Okay.
And I had a question about using the built-in scheduling routing versus buying the extra automation services. If you can accomplish the same task. Now, I believe, you know, when you want to update text areas and you want to send emails, export reports, you'll need to use automation services, not the scheduling. The scheduling and routing is more for loading and caching the data in the library in the Spotfire server memory, correct?
Correct, yes. And the exact example of this is, remember, the Spotfire server is more of a security and routing tier, like you said, right? Its purpose is to access metadata from the Spotfire library and to act, you know, as the central router. The worker service tier is the automation services, web players, statistical services, so on and so forth, right? So it doesn't replace that functionality. Spotfire server can augment it, but it doesn't replace the underlying functionality.
Okay. With configuration blocks, what's the extent of the configuration blocks with the properties? Is someone wanted to know if you could run if and for loops within the configuration blocks, or if it's just a call to those properties in the analysis configuration?
So we have very good documentation about configuration blocks that I was pointed to, but I have personally never used conditional statements there. It's usually a set of properties. You do conditionals more with information links, but I'll have to double check that. So maybe I can get back to you or augment a bit of this recording or add some information at the bottom, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. Yeah, we got quite a bit of questions here. I'll take one more and then I'll do the closeout. Prakash wanted to know, can we run Iron Python and tear data functions with automation services?
Yes, so the sky's the limit with automation services. Out of the box, you have these maybe 10 or 14 custom tasks. But if you wanted to augment this, and there are several customers who do this, you would have to do some kind of custom scripting to just enable one more job in the drop-down list. But it's completely doable, and you can use pre-built data functions. I've seen that happen, but yes, it'll be more of your exercise to enable that. We can provide some guidance, but you'll have to enable that.
Okay. We'll take these other questions from the chat and Q&A, and we'll see if we can post them on the community. I'm going to share my screen, and we do post these recordings online. Before I do the closeout slides, I did want to show you a couple quick things from Minerva's presentation. So again, on the export to PDF, you can go down to prepared report, as she was mentioning. And I wanted to just really explicitly mention that you can configure multiple views and settings here. So even if you have one dashboard page that shows just one page, you could actually have that report show. Let's say you're showing sales by region, and there's 20 different regions and one dashboard page. Your prepared report could have 20 different pages. It'll have a different page for each region. So just because your dashboard has one page, and it doesn't mean your report has to have one page, you can show each of those different settings and create that prepared report for automation services. And then I quickly also wanted to show, she had mentioned bookmarks. So if you don't know, you can configure bookmarks in the Spotfire analysis. This is like some Boston Airbnb locations. I can select some data, and I can see, like a heat map of that area. And I can save this as a bookmark. And then if I click something else, just let this compute the heat map over there. I can always go back to this other setting, and this will go back to my other configuration and show me exactly what I had selected. And with these bookmarks, you can right click and you can choose if you wanted to apply to the whole page layout and visualizations, or just filters, just markings, just active page. So you can control the level at which those bookmarks work. And then again, automation services can call those bookmarks and run that, export reports, things like that. So just to close out real quick here. Okay, it's just a reminder, you can ask questions on our community. Post with the hashtag Dr. Spotfire. You can also tweet with hashtag Dr. Spotfire, or email us directly, drspotfire@tibco.com. We have these user groups. I put links in the chat. We have a LinkedIn group that's it's growing right now. We just started these user groups within the past couple months. It's become very popular. If you need help with Spotfire, you can ask your questions. We're posting new tips and tricks in this regularly, a couple times a week. There's also Facebook and Reddit groups. And I encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. About once or twice a week, we're putting out quick tip videos that are designed to be short and bite-sized to help you with various Spotfire things. So subscribe to the channel and you'll see those. You'll also get the session recordings from today and all our previous sessions. We were putting these on the on-demand page on the TIBCO website. We've gone back to just putting this straight on YouTube. So if you just check the YouTube, this recording from today should be available within the next 3 or 4 days or so, 3 or 4 business days. Next time, Colin Gray, data scientist from TIBCO, will be showing how to use AWS and Azure, different cloud services, to do visual machine learning, image recognition, using different cloud capabilities. So hope you guys join us next time. We'll, again, try to put the answers to some of those questions in the community somewhere. So just check the Dr. Spotfire page, and or you can actually email me at drspotfire@tibco.com with your questions, and I can answer you there. Thank you, guys, and we'll catch you next time.